The Supreme Court, though, let's return to our major story today, will rule later whether Parliament or ministers have the power to begin the process of leaving the EU.
We've been promised a red, white and blue Brexit, a clean break from European Union membership rather than a gradual withdrawal. But who has the power to fire this starting gun?
Well, the government, Theresa May and her ministers, or Parliament, the elected MPs in the Commons and their neighbours in the House of Lords. Both sides at court agreed that the case wasn't about in or out, just about how.
So if the government wins its case today, it will trigger Article 50 and begin the process by the end of March. If it loses, it may still try to meet that deadline, but will have to consult Parliament and will likely ask MPs and Lords to vote on a Brexit bill.
Let's get more on this from the former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. He campaigned for a Remain vote in the referendum and is now the Liberal Democrat spokesman on Brexit. Good morning to you, Mr Clegg. Thank you very much for your time on this. So, if the government does lose today, what will your party look to do in Parliament?
So I think if the government loses, by the way, I think it's extraordinary that this even ended up in court. You would have thought it's perfectly normal to give, a Parliament a say on something as momentous as this. But if the government loses, in other words, if MPs have a say, I don't think, given that the Labour Party have in effect, written a blank cheque for the government and said they will support them come what may, I don't think there's any risk that Parliament will stop Article 50 from being triggered. The question is whether and what kind of amendments might be tabled. And I think it's difficult to predict, but I think there will be some efforts across parties to, for instance, make sure that the government limits the economic damage of what they appear determined to do, which is pull the United Kingdom out of the single market. I think there will be amendments to make sure that MPs have a look at what's going on in the negotiations while they're going on, not just at the beginning and the end. And as you know, the Liberal Democrats also believe that when a final deal emerges in years to come, that is put to the people, and the people have a final say on whether they like or don't like the final deal that emerges from these negotiations.
There might be many people watching this morning and thinking, just accept it. We understand that you and many others didn't want to leave the EU, but the UK have voted to do that, and that is now what is going to happen. So stop arguing about it.
I think what we're arguing about is not, of course, you're right to say that much though I was disappointed by the outcome, that the government has a mandate from the British people to pull us out of the European Union. The complicated bit is how to pull us out of the European Union. That isn't a straightforward matter, and there are lots of different choices. And as you will remember, the sort of Brexit campaign, Nigel Farage, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, well, they made lots of commitments like, pots of money for the NHS every week and a cut for VAT and things that they've now fallen silent on, but they weren't articulate about what the deal actually means. So I think it's reasonable to say that at the end of this process, much as it was kicked off by the British people, it should also be signed off by the British people, and it shouldn't just become a thing for politicians to decide upon at the end of the process.
Didn't Theresa May make it clear what her Brexit plans were and the government's plans were, though, in the speech last week?
Well, I'm here, as you can see, in Brussels, fun enough, just to sort of talk to folk to sort of get under the skin of some of this, because it's all very well to say, you want to be a great global free trading Britain and then declare that you're going to pull out of the world's most sophisticated and most successful free trading area, the EU single market, created, as you'll remember, by Margaret Thatcher. So there are huge numbers of contradictions in the government's position, and one way or another these will need to be resolved and unravelled in the years ahead. And I suspect the final deal will look substantially different to what Theresa May has set out. That's the nature of negotiations, and that's why we think it's important that people should have a say at the end, whether they agree or disagree with the final outcome of these talks.
But again, people have already had a say, haven't they? And Brexit has been decided, and surely whatever changes you make, that they will get through anyway. Won't MPs just nod those changes through anyway?
I agree with you. I think MPs, certainly at this early stage, will give their consent for the government to start the Article 50 negotiations. But as I say, I think if you look further forward, 2 years hence, or maybe it'll take longer, several years hence, I think it's important to ask ourselves now how we, as a country, want to put the finishing touches, if you like, to this very complex negotiation, for which there are many, many questions now and only a very few answers. And also, as you know, young people in particular voted in overwhelming numbers for a different direction of travel. And so it seems right that since we don't know what the final deal is, to give to give the people a say and not just leave it in the hands of politicians.
Can I ask you one more on Prime Minister Theresa May? You'll have seen the front page of many of the papers today saying that she was aware, apparently, of what happened with the Trident missile misfire before she addressed MPs in Parliament. With that in mind, do you think she has a duty to clarify what she knew, when she knew it, and to address these issues?
Of course she should. I mean, it's a very serious matter whether if these missiles are now, or at least some of them, misfiring. But to not have told Parliament at a point where Parliament was making a major decision, a decision which I so happen to have disagreed with, about spending billions and billions of pounds of British taxpayers' money in the future to replace the existing system, to not have told MPs that there were some flaws. I'm not actually convinced that it would have changed the decision in Parliament, but it seems to me to have been a very relevant piece of information that should have been made public, and they certainly should come clean now. I think all this endless ducking and weaving, it just, I think they should stop digging now, the government, and come clean.
Nick Clegg, appreciate your time on Breakfast this morning. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much.